I lost the biggest presentation of my career in under 30 seconds. The CEO's son walked into the boardroom, took the remote from my hand, and turned off my slides. 6 investors were sitting across the table. 3 years of process development disappeared from the screen. "We don't need your old-school approach anymore," Oliver Caldwell said. Then he started presenting my manufacturing process as if it were his own breakthrough. "My name is Warren Buckley, and I'm 47 years old. Until 2 days ago, I was the chief manufacturing engineer at Apex Biotech. What happened in that boardroom changed everything. The presentation had been scheduled for months. 6 executives from Patriot Capital Partners had flown in from New York to evaluate our pharmaceutical manufacturing capabilities. They weren't there for a routine update. This was about a $2.6 billion partnership to scale domestic drug production. The process I'd developed over 3 years could revolutionize how we manufacture critical medications right here in America. Charles Caldwell, Apex's CEO, had personally asked me to present the technical specifications. At the time, I thought it meant he trusted my work. The boardroom looked exactly like the kind of place where decisions worth billions get made. Polished table, leather chairs, and a view of our manufacturing floor below, where 3,200 people worked every day. I had just reached the critical part of my presentation, the yield optimization phase that made our process 40% more efficient than anything coming out of Asia. That's when the door opened without a knock. Oliver Caldwell, Charles's 29-year-old son, walked straight to the front. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look at me. Just picked up my presentation remote and clicked it off. "Gentlemen, we're pivoting to a more innovative approach," he announced. I waited for Charles to say something. He didn't. He leaned back in his chair and nodded slightly, like this had all been planned. The investors looked confused for maybe 5 seconds. Then Oliver started his own presentation. The diagrams on the screen looked familiar, painfully familiar. They were mine, but the labels had been changed. My 3 years of 12-hour days in the pilot plant, working through temperature calibrations and pressure tolerances, watching yields climb from 60% to 94% efficiency. All of it was up there with Oliver's name attached. But that wasn't the worst part. As I listened to his presentation, I realized he was describing a plan to move production overseas. Strategic partnerships with Asian manufacturers, he called it. Lower labor costs, reduced regulatory overhead, those 3,200 jobs on the floor below us, gone within 18 months. I stood there trying to understand how this was happening in real time. No one interrupted. No one asked why the chief manufacturing engineer was being cut out of a manufacturing presentation. Within minutes, the investors were nodding along. One of them even stood up and clapped. I closed my laptop, forced a smile, and said, "Good luck with the implementation." Then I walked out. 48 hours later, their $2.6 billion celebration had turned into a disaster. Because the one person who actually understood how the process worked was the person they'd just humiliated in front of their investors. Let me back up 6 months. Oliver had joined Apex with the official title of VP Strategic Development. Unofficially, everyone knew why he was there. Daddy was grooming him for bigger things. Unlike the rest of us who'd spent decades in pharmaceutical manufacturing, Oliver's background was in business consulting. He'd never run a production line, never troubleshot a batch failure at 2 a.m., never felt the pressure of keeping medicine flowing to hospitals that needed it. But he became very interested in my work. At first, it seemed harmless. He'd ask technical questions about throughput rates, about quality control metrics, about how we maintain sterile conditions at scale. I thought he was trying to understand the business better. "Could I review your process documentation?" he asked one afternoon. I handed over the summary reports. A week later, he wanted more detailed specifications. Then the pilot plant logs, then my personal engineering notebooks. That should have been a red flag. Those notebooks contained 3 years of troubleshooting, small adjustments, observations that only made sense after running hundreds of batches. The kind of know-how that takes years to develop and minutes to steal. One night, I returned to the plant to check on a temperature-sensitive batch. The building was nearly empty. When I got to my workstation, something felt off. My desk drawer was slightly open. My notebooks were inside, but not arranged the way I'd left them. I pulled the security footage from that evening. Oliver had been in my workspace for nearly an hour, photographing every page of my process notes. Watching that footage, I wasn't angry. I felt like an idiot. He hadn't been trying to understand the science. He'd been studying it, learning it, preparing to claim it. From that moment, I started keeping the critical details to myself. The process worked, but only if you knew the precise timing for catalyst introduction, the exact pressure settings for each phase, the temperature curves that took months to optimize. Those details never made it into any official documentation. They stayed in my head. The morning after the investor presentation, I went to the plant to clear out my desk, but when I walked into the manufacturing wing, something was wrong. The production floor was too quiet. Normally by 7 a.m. we'd have 3 lines running, technicians monitoring quality specs, supervisors coordinating shift changes. Instead, people were standing around in small groups, talking quietly. Jerry Walsh, our floor supervisor for 15 years, walked over. "Warren, we've been trying to run your process since yesterday afternoon. It keeps failing." I looked at the nearest production monitor. Error codes flashed red across the screen. Batch 4C471, quality failure. Batch 4C472, yield below specification. Batch 4C473, process abort due to temperature deviation. "How many failures?" I asked. 12 consecutive batches, Jerry said quietly. "Nobody can figure out what's wrong." That's when Charles Caldwell's voice echoed across the floor. "Warren, my office, now." Charles was standing by his window when I walked in, looking down at the production floor where our people were trying to figure out why everything had stopped working. "What did you do to the process?" he demanded. "I resigned," I said. "Nothing more. The team can't reproduce your results. The investors are coming back tomorrow for a live demonstration." I leaned against his conference table. "That sounds like a problem." The door opened. Oliver walked in, and for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look confident. "You sabotaged it," he said. "Why would I do that?" "Because you're angry about the presentation." Charles stepped forward. "The investors expect to see a working demonstration tomorrow morning. They're talking about pulling the entire deal." I nodded slowly. "Yesterday you made it clear you don't need my old school approach." Neither of them answered. I picked up my box of personal items and headed for the door. "Good luck with the demonstration." As I walked across the plant floor, another alarm started blaring. Batch failure number 13. Some of the line workers looked at me with expressions I'd never seen before, not anger, fear. They understood what this meant better than management did. Charles showed up at my house that evening. I watched his black sedan pull into my driveway and knew this conversation was coming. "We need to talk," he said when I opened the door. "About what?" "You know exactly what. The process isn't working without you." I led him into my living room. He looked around at my modest furniture, the engineering textbooks on my shelves, the family photos on my mantle. This wasn't the executive suite he was used to. "The manufacturing process was developed at Apex facilities," he said. "That makes it company property. The facilities are yours," I replied. "The knowledge isn't. If you try to take that technology anywhere else, we'll pursue legal action." I walked over to my kitchen table and turned my laptop toward him. On the screen was a business registration document, Buckley Manufacturing Solutions, LLC, I said. "Filed it 3 weeks ago. Mostly paperwork for now, but the process documentation is mine." For the first time since he'd arrived, Charles looked uncertain, because he was starting to understand that the situation he thought he controlled was already beyond his reach. The investors returned the next morning exactly as scheduled. 6 executives from Patriot Capital walked into Apex expecting to see the revolutionary manufacturing process that had impressed them 2 days earlier. But this time they weren't there for a presentation. They wanted to see it work. Charles greeted them in the boardroom with his usual confidence, but up close it looked strained. "Our team has prepared a live demonstration on the production floor," he announced. They followed him down to the plant. Oliver was waiting at the main production line, wearing a crisp lab coat that looked like it had never seen actual manufacturing work. Behind him, technicians had set up monitoring stations, quality control instruments, everything needed to run a full batch. "Today we'll demonstrate real-time pharmaceutical manufacturing," Oliver said. "You'll see our efficiency improvements in action." The process began. Raw materials fed into the reaction vessel. Temperature ramped up according to specification. For the first hour, everything looked normal. The investors watched through the observation windows, taking notes, asking technical questions that Oliver answered with confidence. Then we reached the critical phase, the moment where my 3 years of optimization either worked or failed. Temperature spiked beyond tolerance. Pressure readings went erratic. Quality sensors triggered automatic shutdown protocols. "What's happening?" one of the investors asked. Oliver stared at the control panel. "Technical malfunction. We'll reset and try again." They did. Same result, another failure. A third attempt produced the same cascade of errors. Adrian Cole, the lead investor, finally asked the obvious question. "Where's your chief manufacturing engineer, Dr. Buckley is no longer with the company," Charles said carefully. As of when, 2 days ago, the room went dead quiet. Adrian studied the failed production displays, then looked back at Charles. "So you terminated your lead engineer 2 days before asking us to evaluate his process." No one had a good answer for that. I wasn't there to see it happen, but Jerry told me about it later. After the investors left, Oliver tried to blame the equipment. Then he blamed the technicians. Then he started yelling about sabotage and corporate espionage. Jerry just looked at him and said, "Son, you can't steal 25 years of experience from a notebook." That afternoon, my phone rang. Adrian Cole's voice was calm but direct. "Dr. Buckley, I think we need to have a conversation about your manufacturing process. I'm listening, not over the phone. Can you meet us tomorrow morning?" We met the next day at a small facility across town. Nothing fancy, just a rented space with basic equipment and the pilot-scale reactor I'd been quietly assembling for weeks. Adrian arrived with two of his technical advisors. "This is where you've been working," he asked. "Getting ready?" I said. I walked them through the same process Oliver had tried to demonstrate, same raw materials, same initial conditions. But when we reached the critical phase, I made the adjustments that 3 years of experience had taught me. Catalyst timing shifted by 30 seconds. Pressure relief at precisely the right moment. Temperature curve adjusted based on batch composition. The reaction proceeded smoothly. Quality indicators stayed within specification. Final yield, 94.3% efficiency. "Run it again," Adrian said. We did. Same result. Perfect yield, no failures, production metrics that exceeded anything being manufactured overseas. Adrian finally looked up from the data, "So the process works." "Yes. But not at Apex, not without me." The room fell silent because every investor there understood something that Apex management had missed. The presentation they'd applauded wasn't the technology. The technology was sitting right in front of them. "We'd like to discuss funding," Adrian said. "Full-scale domestic manufacturing. Are you interested?" 3 days later, I signed the biggest deal of my life. Not the $2.6 billion that Apex had lost, but something better. A partnership that would build American pharmaceutical manufacturing from the ground up. Real jobs, real production, real independence from overseas supply chains. Within a week, Patriot Capital had made their decision. The partnership with Apex was terminated. Instead, they offered to fund my new operation. Not just the pilot facility, but full-scale domestic manufacturing. American jobs, American innovation, American pharmaceutical independence. The news hit Apex like a freight train. I heard about it from Jerry, who called me the day after the announcement. "Warren, you should see this place," he said. "Half the management team is in emergency meetings. The other half is updating their resumes. What about the production floor? That's the thing. We're still trying to run your process. 17 failures in a row now. They brought in consultants from 3 different companies. None of them can figure it out." I felt bad for the line workers, but not for management. They'd made their choice. 3 months later, Buckley Manufacturing Solutions employed 127 people and was producing medications for government stockpiles. The facility wasn't much to look at from the outside, a converted warehouse in an industrial park, but inside, we were running the most efficient pharmaceutical production in North America. Jerry was my first hire. He knew quality control better than anyone I'd ever worked with, and he understood what we were building, not just a company, but a statement. American manufacturing could compete with anyone in the world when you combine the right process with the right people. "This feels different," Jerry told me. One morning, as we watched the first full production run, at Apex, we were just trying to hit numbers. Here, we're making something that matters. He was right. Every batch we produced went to strategic medical reserves, hospital systems, or research institutions. When supply chains got disrupted by global crises, our medications were still flowing to the people who needed them. 6 months after that, we'd expanded to 340 employees and signed contracts with major hospital systems across the Midwest. The waiting list for our products was 6 months long, not because we couldn't produce enough, but because everyone wanted the reliability that came with domestic manufacturing. The day we announced our first federal contract, minus $800 million over 5 years for critical drug manufacturing, I got a call I wasn't expecting, Warren. It was Jerry's voice, but he wasn't calling from our facility, Jerry. "Where are you?" "Still at Apex." "Well, for about 5 more minutes. They just announced they're closing the plant, all 3,200 jobs. Moving production to Malaysia." I wasn't surprised. Oliver's overseas partnership plan had proceeded exactly as he'd outlined in his presentation. Lower costs, reduced oversight, maximum profit margins. Everything except the manufacturing expertise that made it actually work, Jerry. "You still interested in running a production floor, are you offering?" "We're expanding again. New facility, need an experienced supervisor who knows quality. When do I start?" "How about Monday?" By the end of the year, 67 former Apex employees were working at Buckley Manufacturing. We weren't just making medicine. We were proving that American manufacturing could compete with anyone in the world. Better quality, faster delivery, and when supply chains got disrupted by global crises, our medications were still flowing to the hospitals that needed them. The second facility opened 18 months later than a third. Each one employed between 150 and 200 people, mostly from communities where manufacturing jobs had disappeared over the past decade. These weren't minimum wage positions. These were skilled manufacturing jobs with benefits, training programs, and career advancement. I started getting calls from other engineers, other companies, other investors, people who'd watched what we built and wanted to be part of it. Not just the profits, but the mission. Bringing pharmaceutical manufacturing back to America, the vindication came in an unexpected way. During a congressional hearing on pharmaceutical supply chain security, I was invited to testify about domestic manufacturing capabilities. The committee room was packed with industry executives, government officials, and reporters. Dr. Buckley, the committee chairman, asked, in your opinion, what are the strategic risks of relying on overseas pharmaceutical production? I thought about Oliver's presentation, about those 3,200 jobs that had vanished, about the empty production floor at Apex. Senator, when you control the manufacturing process, you control the supply. When someone else controls the manufacturing process, you're dependent on their priorities, their stability, their willingness to keep producing what you need. And domestic manufacturing can address those concerns. It already is. Our facilities produce 2.3 million doses per month of critical medications. Quality rates exceed 99.7%. Delivery times average 72 hours to anywhere in the continental United States. We're not dependent on shipping schedules, foreign regulations, or international politics. After the hearing, a reporter approached me in the hallway. Dr. Buckley, there are rumors that your former company tried to recruit you back. Any comment? I smiled. I'm exactly where I need to be. What I didn't tell the reporter was that Charles had called me 6 months earlier. Apex was struggling. The Malaysian facility had quality problems, regulatory issues, supply chain disruptions. They were hemorrhaging money and losing contracts. Warren, we made mistakes, Charles had said. Maybe we can work something out. Charles, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. There's a difference. The board would authorize a significant compensation package, full control over manufacturing operations. Whatever you need, I already have what I need. That was the last time we spoke. 2 months later, Apex announced they were selling their remaining assets and dissolving the company. Oliver, last I heard, was facing a congressional investigation into technology transfer violations. Turns out photographing proprietary manufacturing processes and sharing them with foreign competitors raises national security questions. Charles retired quietly. No press conferences, no golden parachute announcements, just a brief statement about pursuing other opportunities. As for me, I'm still doing what I've always done, manufacturing critical medications, training the next generation of engineers, and proving that American innovation doesn't need to be shipped overseas to be profitable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just doing your job better than anyone thought possible and letting the results speak for themselves. The gauge readings on my newest production line show 96.2% efficiency today. That's a personal best. The temperature curves are perfect, pressure tolerance is optimal, and yield rates that would make any engineer proud. More importantly, 450 American families have good-paying manufacturing jobs because someone decided that expertise matters more than politics. But this story isn't just about one company or one process. It's about what happens when we stop accepting that good jobs have to go overseas, that innovation belongs to whoever has the best connections, that experience doesn't matter as much as a fancy presentation. 3 years ago, I thought loyalty meant keeping your head down, doing good work, and trusting that the company would take care of you. I learned the hard way that loyalty is a two-way street. When it stops flowing both directions, you need to find your own path. The pharmaceutical industry taught me something else. When you control the manufacturing process, you control more than just production. You control quality, delivery, reliability, and ultimately whether people get the medications they need when they need them. That's not just business, that's responsibility. Today, Buckley Manufacturing Solutions operates 4 facilities across 3 states. We employ 847 people in communities where manufacturing jobs disappeared decades ago. Our production efficiency rates consistently exceed 95%. Quality metrics hit 99.8% on average. We've never missed a delivery deadline for a government contract. Those numbers matter, but they don't tell the whole story. Last month, I got a letter from a hospital administrator in Ohio. A supply chain disruption had cut off their access to a critical medication. Foreign suppliers were back-ordered for 6 weeks. We had them resupplied in 48 hours. Your company saved lives, the letter said. Not because you were the cheapest option, but because you were the most reliable. That's what American manufacturing can be when it's done right. Not the cheapest, but the best. Not the most convenient for shareholders, but the most reliable for the people who actually need the product. Jerry still runs our main production floor. He's training supervisors who will go on to run other facilities, other companies, other American manufacturing operations. The knowledge doesn't stop here, it spreads. Sarah Hoffman, one of my former technicians from Apex, now has her own engineering firm specializing in pharmaceutical process optimization. She's working with 6 companies to bring production back from overseas. The expertise multiplies. Last week I spoke at a manufacturing conference in Detroit. The audience was filled with engineers, plant managers, and business owners who'd seen their industries hollowed out by globalization. The questions they asked weren't about technology or profit margins. How do you compete with overseas labor costs? By not trying to. You compete on quality, reliability, innovation, and speed. You compete on being there when your customers need you. How do you handle investors who only care about quarterly numbers? You find investors who understand that sustainable business means building something that lasts. They exist, but you have to look for them. How do you know when it's time to leave and start your own company? When staying means compromising the principles that made you good at your job in the first place. After the conference, a young engineer approached me, maybe 25 years old, fresh out of school, working at a company that was planning to move production to Vietnam. Dr. Buckley, I don't have 25 years of experience like you did. How do I know if I'm ready to take a risk? You're never ready, I told him, but if you wait until you're ready, someone else will have already stolen your work and moved on. I gave him my card. 6 months later, he called. His company had tried to implement his process improvement in Vietnam. It failed spectacularly. They offered him a promotion to fix it. He turned it down and started his own consulting firm instead. He's working with 3 manufacturers now, helping them optimize processes for domestic production. The cycle continues. The investigation into Oliver's technology transfer violations concluded last month. He was fined $2.3 million and banned from working in any industry that handles controlled technology. The money went to a fund for displaced manufacturing workers. Charles sold his house in Connecticut and moved to Florida. I heard he's working as a business consultant now, helping companies avoid the mistakes he made. There's irony in that, but also maybe some redemption. As for Apex, the facility where I spent 25 years is being converted into a logistics hub. The advanced manufacturing equipment was sold at auction. Some of it ended up in our 4th facility. Jerry took particular satisfaction in training our newest technicians on the same machines he'd operated at Apex. These machines remember how to make quality products, he said. They just needed people who remembered how to run them properly. Today marks exactly 3 years since Oliver walked into that boardroom and stole my presentation. 3 years since I thought my career was over. 3 years since I learned that sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of building something better. The morning production report shows all 4 facilities operating at optimal efficiency. Quality metrics within specification, delivery schedules on track. Employment at full capacity with a waiting list of qualified candidates. More importantly, we're training the next generation. Apprenticeship programs in partnership with local community colleges. Scholarship funds for engineering students. Mentorship programs pairing experienced workers with newcomers. The knowledge doesn't die with us, it grows. I started this story talking about losing the biggest presentation of my career, but I didn't really lose it. I just discovered it belongs somewhere else. Somewhere it could do more good, create more value, support more families, and prove that American manufacturing isn't dead. It was just waiting for people who believed in it enough to take the risks that innovation requires. Listen, if you're reading this and you've ever felt like your experience doesn't matter, like your expertise is disposable, like loyalty is a one-way transaction, you're not alone. And you're not powerless. The knowledge in your head, the skills in your hands, the principles that guide your work, those belong to you, not to any company that employs you. The question isn't whether you can compete with cheaper alternatives. The question is whether you can build something better, something that lasts, something that creates value for the people who depend on your work. In my experience, the answer is usually yes, but only if you're willing to bet on yourself when no one else will. Sometimes that's exactly what expertise looks like.
Don't pity me. My heart doesn't need your mercy. I can still stand on my own. I was broken by your leaving, fell deeper than I thought I would, but pain has taught me how to heal now and survive what once I couldn't. You don't have to look back sadly, don't reach out with guilty hands. What you shattered made me stronger. Now I rise where I once collapsed. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow. I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll learn to breathe again. I once begged for your affection. Now I've learned my worth in scars. And the man you left in pieces found his own way through the dark. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow. I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll learn to breathe again. So keep your sympathy behind you. I don't need what's left undone. Sometimes losing who once broke you is how healing has begun. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow. I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll rise alone again. I'll rise alone again.
They say just forget. Move on like it's easy. But forgetting you feels like remembering someone I've never seen. I've been trying to erase you from the places in my mind, but the harder that I fight it, the more you're hard to leave behind. Every memory keeps slipping through the cracks I try to close, like a face I should remember, but somehow never know. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Every moment turns to fragments, every thought just fades to blue, like I'm searching for a feeling that still only leads to you. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. If I Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true.